The pro-democracy protests began around the 29th of June. And then we started to see reports of the king apparently fleeing the country. There was very little information coming through. At this point, Cebelihle was already in the country, so he was dispatched to go and see what was happening. During the first few days that he was there, it was quite tense. There was a lockdown of services, and as you know, Yvonne, the internet services were shut down, so communication could not come out to go into the country. It was difficult to get a hold of people. In the first few days, Cebelihle was stopped at a roadblock. He was threatened. Guns were pointed at him. He received threatening messages via SMS to say that he was being watched and they should be careful. Crucial images that he had taken in the first few days were deleted. It was a few days later that Magnificent had joined him. Magnificent was about an hour away from where the border was, and he had been working consistently. Actually, both of them have been working consistently covering eSwatini. This was prior to the protests. So he was in, and they obviously, it was great to have them together because they could help and support each other. As soon as Magnificent got there, he had spent the most of last week tracking down people that had been shot by the security forces, trying to do interviews with people. They'd visited several hospitals, they'd done interviews with family members, they'd interviewed people in hospital, as you've seen from our story. At this stage, of course, everything had been denied. The government had been denying that there was anybody that had been shot or murdered or anything. It was difficult to verify the information because it was just, at this point, anecdotal information. There was no images, there was no interviews with people that were coming through. They had then decided to cover a funeral, and they were on their way back on Sunday morning from that funeral when they were stopped along the main freeway, which is the MR3 freeway. And the soldiers had separated the two of them. They'd taken Cebelihle aside and they'd questioned him. While we were doing this, Magnificent had Cebelihle's phone and had been texting us the entire time to let us know what was happening. So at this point, obviously, we were quite stressed. We immediately started speaking to our lawyers to try and just have a backup, just in case something happened. We wanted to make sure that we had already gotten everything moving so we could be prepared in case things got really bad. We lost communication with them around 10 a.m. We hadn't heard from them. At this point, we'd already said to our lawyers, start looking for a lawyer in eSwatini so we can brief them just in case we need to get them out. They were taken to the police station, and there was a group of people that were there, and he managed to borrow someone's cell phone. At this point, their cell phones had been taken away. And thankfully, this is a lesson for all of us, he memorized his mother's number. So always memorize somebody's number just in case. So he called his mother and said to her, I've been arrested. This is where we are. Call Monica. At this point, his mom got in touch with one of our other colleagues, Musa, and then Musa got in touch with me. By then, I'd already spoken to the lawyers, and then we dispatched, she said, get a lawyer, I don't know where they've been taken, but it's a small town, it can't be very far. We still had no communication until about just after 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. At this point, the lawyer managed to get them out. He got there at 2:30. They were out by 3-ish. And we managed to speak to them very briefly. They had decided to go to a local hospital to get checked out. And this is when we discovered that they were under intense interrogation for several hours by the intelligence unit. They were assaulted, they were kicked. And then you can see from our report that plastic bags were put over their heads in an attempt to suffocate them. And we know that this is called tubing. It's an old torture technique that's been used globally and here in South Africa. When they got to the hospital, they got checked out. It was unsafe for them to leave at this point. They couldn't go back to the lodge where they'd been staying. So they spent the night sleeping in the car. A very kind woman at the hospital gave them a cup of tea and gave them refuge, and they borrowed the phone of one of the cleaners so that they could communicate with us. So we just called them on that number. They were in good spirits at this point. The following day, we had to get their stuff back from the lodge. And then by 3:30 on Monday afternoon, they had crossed over into South Africa. So those, 48 hours, 24 hours was very, very intense. Just about getting them across. Because at that point, there were still sporadic roadblocks all over the country of Swaziland. There were soldiers at the border, there were soldiers at strategic points. They might have been released, but we weren't sure if we could even get them out. They could have been stopped at any point from then on. So it was pretty stressful. since we broke the story, we published our own story, the one that Mndebele and Cebelihle, basically risked their own personal safety to get out. There's been an outpouring of support for them from other media houses, but also more importantly, the story has been picked up. It's, more people are interested and actually want to know what's going on in Swaziland. There was a story published today with rather graphic images about how terrible it is and the kind of repression those people are facing. I joined in last night in a memorial that they've been holding via Zoom for the families and the victims. And it was terrible. It was so sad. These people can't communicate. They can't get their stories out. And the sad thing was this one gentleman was relaying a story of how his sister died. And it was so awful. She was one of the protesters that was shot on the 29th of June. She was shot in the knee. And the reason she died is because she bled to death. They could not get her help. So this person could have survived. And we're seeing there's a lot of people who are suffering from amputations as well. Lots of people are being injured and amputated. It's just not getting out because the internet's blocked. No one is allowed to go in and report. When we were given the chance, we had the chance, you saw what happened, so we had to leave. So there's no media that's able to get in there and get the story out, or meet people on that side able to get it out. It's such a crisis, and I don't know how many more people are going to have to die for anyone to actually decide, well, let's do something. It's unacceptable, and I'm just shocked, I guess, the fact that the South African government hasn't even said anything or tried anything, or is even interested in these people who are actually just asking for democracy. And it's yeah, I don't know what else to say. I'm just gobsmacked. Join in, encourage other people in the solidarity space to join in on those memorials. Like, listen to what the people have to say, communicate with them, ask them what do they need, what you can do. I don't want to speak for them because I can't communicate what they need and what they would need from other people. So that would be the best way to do, is try and get in touch with people over there. There are numbers, they're on Facebook. And my thing is, like, South Africans and people who are interested in showing support is to get in touch with the people directly and ask them what it is that they need and what you can do to support them.